Alrighty, guys. Today we're talking the most serious, most important video I'll ever make. How to play a dwarf in a World of Darkness role-playing game. Now, each of these games, like Vampire the Masquerade, Hunter the Reckoning, Mage the Ascension, Werewolf the Apocalypse, I forget, something like that. They all have systems of merits and flaws for your characters that you can make. Basically, tiny little minor advantages and disadvantages you can give your character. And if you take a very specific set of merits and flaws, you can kind of recreate a dwarf in any of these games. Now, most of these use the Hunter the Reckoning player's guide. So, and this doesn't actually make you an actual dwarf, it just makes you a person with dwarfism that happens to have all the same characteristics of a classic fantasy dwarf. Hollow Leg allows you to drink copious amounts of alcohol without any penalty. Robust Health basically gives you that dwarven resilience, that resistance to poison and illness. Good night vision doesn't actually give you straight up dark vision or cave sight or tunnel vision or whatever, but it's a decent approximation, at least if you're like a normal human. I guess if you're making a vampire, you obviously probably wouldn't need this. Your code of honor, because dwarves are honorable, and your mechanical aptitude makes you better at repairing stuff. Sort of a reflection of their ability to like engineer and do all that architecture stuff and all that jazz. Dwarves happen to be, or tend to be, defensive and stubborn, so you're really not great in social situations, especially if you're trying to like argue with someone and like convince them of something. Short temper, you're very quick to anger, and you're literally physically just short, so you have very short legs and don't move very fast. And vengeful, whenever you have that opportunity to seek out and enact your revenge, like to settle your grudge with someone, you'll always try to do that. Now this is option one because it could technically apply to any game, but it doesn't actually make you a real dwarf by any means. You're just a person with dwarfism. But with option 2 here, you can actually get a little bit closer to playing a dwarf. Technically a half dwarf, if you will, because like in Changeling the Dreaming, you play a changeling, which is like a half fae, half human. One of the families of fae, one of the kith, is known as the Knockers. The Knockers are sort of like your classic sort of fairy tale, like ancient Norse, ancient Celtic, like Anglo mythology dwarves. So like you're not really like a Warhammer D&D dwarf. You're more of just like a little mischievous fairy guy, but they very much so lean towards the like engineering and mechanics, and they make little gizmos and maybe a little bit closer to like gnomes in like D&D, but I think if you sort of finagle them in the right way, you could more so sell them as dwarves. But once you get back far enough in fairy tale times, and dwarves and gnomes and all those types of fairies have a lot of crossover. But Knockers, they're opposite, their rivals, their enemies are the goblins. So, that plays a little more into the dwarf angle. And option 3, definitely the best way to play an actual straight up beer drinking, axe wielding, orc head cutting off in dwarf. But this is definitely the least possible, the least realistic. Mage the Ascension. So this has like a magic system where you need to like manipulate within the consensus of reality So for example, you might like hit someone with a lightning bolt out in the middle of the street in an open day. If you do that, people are going to have their like view of reality shattered, and you're going to generate a lot of this stuff called paradox, and then you're going to like have a heart attack or like a stroke, an aneurysm, and just like straight up have your brain explode and you'll die. But if there's like a thunderstorm going on and then you hit someone with a lightning bolt, well, then you can convince people like, oh, well, that guy just got unlucky, and you probably won't generate nearly as much paradox. That's like a super duper duper simplified version. It gets way, way more complicated than that. But there are these like super insane mages called marauders that basically are they're insane mages that like have this bubble of reality warping consensus around them. So like whenever they move, everything around them has their reality changed to now like agree with this like aura that emanates from what are called these marauders, these insane mages, which basically makes them like immune to paradox, but they are like heavily restricted in that they only believe in whatever their specific like schizophrenic beliefs about how the world works. So like if you are playing like this marauder that truly and utterly believes that they are a classic fantasy Gimli dwarf, then they are a dwarf, and everyone that sees them and everyone that's around them also believes that they are a dwarf. So this is both cheating in that a marauder can really believe in anything. Maybe famously, probably not famously actually, but there's Santa Claus does actually exist in the world of Mage the Ascension, at least according to one of the super esoteric splat books that's out there. And Santa Claus is just a marauder mage that believes in like generosity, and that he is like this spirit of giving and of hope and of like restoring happiness in children and whatever. And so that he actually manifests this as this like red coat wearing, sleigh riding magical entity. So good marauders exist out there. Usually they're like evil and insane, but yeah, I don't think any DM in their right mind would ever allow any player to play a marauder, because they are inherently game breaking in their ability to just literally warp reality around them to whatever they want with no restriction, which I guess Mage the Ascension, you already got like a little bit of that, but you do have that paradox restriction that'll end up killing you if you're not careful. So yeah, very unrealistic, but definitely the best way to get as close to a straight up Gimli dwarf. Now, while you're playing a World of Darkness game and trying to jam and force your D&D thoughts and Warhammer thoughts into this game, I'll leave that for the philosophers and scholars to answer. But if you want to do it, that's the options available to you. Alrighty, goodbye.